I'm here with Mark Waldrep, the founder and chief engineer of AIX Records, and we're talking about high-res audio, this very big deal in the news, in the audio-video world today. In fact, later tonight, you will be participating in an event at a recording studio near here. How did this whole high-res resurgence or renaissance come about?
Well, it really, you credit the move to these new formats back in 2000, which really never took off. Both DVD audio and SACD as formats were supposed to be the replacement technology to compact discs, and with better specifications, both sampling rate, word length, but more dynamic range. All the potential is there to do better. But the single biggest thing that was exciting about it is it accommodated surround sound too. You could mix in like home theater mode and have immersive, completely immersive music. Well, as I was talking to one of my colleagues on the board this morning, surround sound doesn't seem like it's a sexy thing anymore. People are, kind of ho-hum. Maybe for TVs and movies it works, but music certainly has not. It's not taken off in that. So, along comes 2000, 2008, 2007. I put up iTracks, which was the world's first high-resolution download site. And then David Chesky and his brother Norman put up HD tracks the following year. And the philosophical differentiation really comes from that essence of defining high-resolution music. I called it high-definition audio at the time. Looks like I lost that war. It's now HRA. But be that as it may, I went down the path with iTracks that the only thing I would allow people to purchase on that site and download were tracks that were actually made, new tracks that were actually recorded with technologies that are better than CDs. That means 96K, 24-bit PCM in my case. And so I did. I made 100 records that way to sort of prove the concept. But far more importantly is the approach behind how those recordings are made. I mean, I just did the sound check over at the studio where this presentation will happen tonight. And the fact is, I'm not overdubbing anything. I'm recording everybody at the same time. It's real life reverb. All those things are far more audible in the difference of the sound than whether it's a DSD recording or 48K 24 bits or a CD res. That's where I went. And so I put maybe 1,500 albums up there now, very carefully selected, and had to meet my metrics about specifications. And David and his brother, who I had asked, I said, because they had their record label, still do, the Chesky Records guy, I said, look, would you like your stuff to be available as download? I said, no, we're working on our own thing, which ultimately became HD Tracks, came out about a year later. And they then approached Warner Brothers and Sony and Universal Music Group, the big labels, as well as a whole bunch of independents, and finally, convinced the licensing arm of those record companies to let free of some of that older catalog. The James Taylors and Cat Stevens, and you're going back to the stuff that you and I grew up with as classic records, recorded on 2-inch 24-track, mixed down to stereo, and then re-encoded or now made available, not in iTunes lossy formats, but now we've dug our way out of that hole. Is there a market? And HD Tracks has certainly proven that there's a very healthy market for audiophiles repurchasing the same music once again, except now with 192 or 96K 24-bit numbers associated with it. That's a difference in interpretation of what the definition of an HD track is. And I have, I've leaned more than a little bit into, let's establish both the source container was an analog tape or a DSD recording or a wire recording or a Blattner phone from 1934. That's the quality of the sound as it was interpreted based on the technology of the time. We have choices now. T-Bone Burnett records on analog tape. He likes the sound.
Even today.
Yeah, Robert Zemeckis records, all of his films at 35 millimeter because he doesn't like the digital thing. I understand that. That's an artistic and not just a technical decision, which is what we were stuck with all those years ago. So for me, I stuck to my guns, being a fairly non-compromising guy, and I said, I'm going to do it the way that I believe. And so my definition of high-resolution music isn't really very complicated at all. It means that we have finally now in the PCM specification of 96 kilohertz and 24 bits, and even if I was held with on the rack, 48K would probably suffice if you do the filtering and conversions very well. 96 gives you a certain amount of margin. I've recorded everything I've done at that spec. So at that point, we've reached the box or the size of fidelity that fits our human instrument, these guys. How much further do we need to go? To 192, to 384, to 768 kilohertz? I mean, come on, that's, you know, chasing butterflies. It's just not going to happen. So for me, I reached a sound level and, more importantly, a production methodology that makes me very happy. And when the guys respond over there at hearing John Gorka's voice through those M2 JBL speakers, they gave me a thumbs up and said, oh my gosh, that sounds pretty amazing. And they had just played James Taylor, which sounded really amazing as well, but different. There's just a thing. And so if you put it in a high-res bucket and you produce with the sensibility of fidelity as your end goal rather than making a hit record, it can produce things I think that audiophiles certainly, and hopefully the mass market will get hip to.
Certainly that's one of the primary differences between your approach and other people's approaches is they are taking older content that doesn't have the frequency or the dynamic range and simply putting it in a larger bucket, as you say, whereas you're recording it from the beginning with all of that information intact, which you can then down-res if you want, but there's more information there to begin with. And you've coined the term provenance for recordings, and you know we use that term for antiques and wine, right? Exactly. But it's just as important here, because you really want to know, and I hearken back to the old early CD days where you'd see AAD or, which would indicate which part was analog and which part was digital. And you're advocating really going even a step beyond that.
Well, absolutely. You know, I got an email from one of the readers. I write a blog every day at realhd-audio.com. And thanks to being on your show a number of times, I get a big hit every time I'm on the home theater. You guys saw you on The Geek, man. I'm a reader now. Is that one of these guys sent me a number of spectrographs, a file, a sort of a backdoor way of looking at what's going on. And as you say, you can tell a lot. Not just by a SPARS code saying that the recording was done analog. I can tell what sample rate that chorus was recorded, because as you look at the Spectra, they changed from chorus to chorus. So somebody in Europe might have recorded one version of the song, they liked those, and then they edited them together, and so you get this sort of, you know, Venetian blind look to the Spectra. And the guy felt, well, you know, maybe I've been conned here. Not conned. All they had to do at the source side of things is say, this was assembled from an analog, you know, recording, or it was done at 4824, or if we get that information, which is what the master quality descriptors, this thing that the DEG, the CEA, and the Recording Academy, as well as the labels, put out a couple of weeks ago, then I think we're gonna go a long ways towards clarifying and satisfying the needs of audiophiles who don't want to spend another $30 on something that they don't know definitively is going to sound any different than the rip of the CD or the vinyl that they had of that song or track before. That's where provenance comes in. Everybody's fixated on the delivery container, and they don't go back and talk about what happened before that. And there's all kinds of approaches, from, you know, what Kevin Reeves is doing with Oscar Peterson, taking those tapes and transferring them and aligning the speed perfectly with technologies. And then there's things like what I do, which is to start, because I didn't have a catalog to delve into to remix or reissue and create the killer app, I had to go in and make new recordings. And so I did. I spent 10 years, 12 years, and a lot of money and a lot of my life demonstrating that you can make recordings like this where everybody's singing and playing at the same time with real reverb. And thankfully, you know, audiophiles, plus, you know, people that bump into those audiophiles when you want to show off their system, have responded in a really positive way. Kept me in business for all this time and got me talking to you on the show all these years later, so it can't all be bad. My time has come, finally. You know, I've been hammering this thing since 2000. Now, finally, the DEG and these various organizations are saying, I think we can let go of that iTunes, you know, black hole that we fell into with MP3s and the rest of it, because bandwidth and the processors and delivery devices like this HTC phone. The big shots over at HTC heard me talking on my blog, and you sit there and look at a phone like this that's got actually 2 speakers. It's a stereo phone. And I will, you know, I was amazed. I listened to some of the tracks on there, and I said, this is amazing. So it doesn't really matter, you know. But this is almost like having a Bluetooth portable speaker a jam box, whatever, you know, sitting by the pool or on your workspace, except you don't need to do that anymore. Now I've got a stereo speaker in front of my nose that's Harman Kardon designed the electronics and consulted with the guys at Sprint and came out with this phone, which, you know, I wrote a comment on my thing. This is really the world's best sounding cell phone. But it's also completely dependent on what you plug into it. They have a technology in here called Clarify, which is supposed to restore MP3s back to their original glory. You know, I did some analysis. It throws some new high-frequency stuff in there. But I think that the Sprint and the HTC folks and so forth should be bragging about this phone, because there will be 1 million of these in people's pockets that are capable of playing high-resolution music at a level that we've never had in our pocket before, unless you get a dedicated, you know, Pono is doing this, and Astel and Kern and a number of other companies are making dedicated devices. But for roughly the same money, in fact, if you sign up for their plan for a whole lot less money, you've got a high-res player and a cell phone and a camera and all the other stuff that comes along with it. It's brilliant.
Well, this kind of obviates, I was thinking when you were talking earlier about DVD audio and SACD, they were supposed to be the replacement of CD, higher quality, higher fidelity, and they both got trounced by MP3, you know, because of convenience, because you could put it in your pocket. And here, finally, we've come full circle, haven't we? Where you can put something in your pocket that has the processing power to play true high-res audio without compromise, without you know, lower fidelity and lossy compression. So the convenience is there and the quality has returned.
That's right. Look, the crystal ball that I subscribe to is that right now this phone holds 160 gigabytes. So that's plenty of room for the stuff that I want to download. I loaded 50 of my tracks on there, listened to it over the trip on out to the East Coast the other day through their little earbud in-ear monitors. It was glorious. Is it audiophile quality? Absolutely. Hooked into the right playback gear. You know, this was on the plane. I'm not really a headphone guy, but these in-ears that they put in there were sealed up your ear and gave you the low frequencies. I was in heaven. But that's not the end play ultimately, because really when it comes down to it, you know, listening to a 320 or a 256 kbps MP3 file versus a 96K 24-bit file is going to be a toss-up for 85% of the consuming public. And would they rather have 10,000 tunes? Let them have their 10,000 tunes. But I think the whole thing shifts up a notch so that we let go of MP3s and we let go of compressed files that are heavily compressed anyway, and we move into this either lossless or so lightly compressed that we're happy. And at the end of the day, that only exists for another 3 to 5 years, because there were already people, and myself included, there's a company called WIMP and Aura Stream that are streaming CD quality now to devices like this that automatically scale along the way depending on what the bandwidth that the phone is receiving. So it's constantly moving from one, you know, data rate to another to try and keep up with CD quality. But if you can have any tune, anywhere, anytime, at CD quality out and stored in the cloud, you don't have to worry about anything crashing or losing your phone or whatever. I think that's the 3 to 5 year and onward look. Is it's going to be part of your cell phone bill you're going to pay, and your library, as well as anything else you ever wanted to have, is going to be available at the touch of a button. It's Spotify on steroids.
And you say at CD quality, but even it could go beyond that.
Well, that's the hope. It's all about, you know, I saw the head of Sprint, Dan Hesse, on a thing here in New York City, video, and talking about their next generation 4G plus. You know, they keep moving this stuff so that the thing is never fixed. It's always who's going to leapfrog over who. Apparently they're investing billions and billions of dollars into allowing us to get more data and so forth. So if we're not charged by data, and one of the other telcos came up with that solution, we'll just give you the music stuff for free. It's not like texts and messages and downloads for your websites and stuff, but they'll just throw in the music piece for you as well. And if that's the case, then you throw an extra $10 or $20 a month on your phone bill, you get CD quality or better, processed for surround. I could play surround files out of this thing too, that'll in headphones or even standing out in front of your face, the thing will surround your head. I mean, those are tweaks that guys like you and I are going to get. Is the everyday person, is my kid going to care? Is the guy bopping down the street on his skateboard? Probably not. But let's give it to them anyway, and then at least we're not going to damage their hearing. It's, you know, to finalize, it's going to come down, as I sat there across from Maureen and the people at the Recording Academy, which I'm a member, and you know, not a big shot, but is we really need to get the record labels and the people engineering and producing the records to appreciate that there is a manageably sized or reasonable sized market out there for people that care about audio. So that a record can come out in the iTunes CD version, all squashed to hell and all loud all the time. And then there's another version out there that doesn't have that compression on it, that actually lets the dynamics flow and the singers sing and the drummer drum to the point of representing real music. That's the future I want to get to.
Me too.
That'd be nice. We get back to some real music.
With some real music. I'm all with you on that. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Good to see you again, Scott.
You too.